I was born in place called Arrah, Arrah, in Bihar, which is my mother's parental home. So my mother and her sisters, they all gave birth to their kids in Arrah. My wife didn't know who she was going to marry when she grew up, but I knew who I was going to marry when I was 7 years old or 6, 7 years old.
The family was good. His family and my family, they were always very friendly because my mother and his mother, they are both sisters, that you know. So we are first cousins too.
So from day one, I knew her, and grew up together. I was 6 or 7 years older than her. We never she was always shy of me because she knew once she became of age, she knew that, oh, this is the guy. So if I was going this way and she was coming that way, in the same hallway, she would get into a room or something.
I used to run away. Yeah, I don't know. Whenever, I coming there, I will go there. That's in India, my cousins used to teach, oh, you are here because Levi is there. I said, yeah. He always came with his mother and, some family getting together or whatever, Eid and all those things. So. But we never used to talk or anything. I was too shy to. I think he was shy too.
Can't remember a day when she has fought with me or I have fought with her. And in matters of some importance, she says, whatever he says, in matters of importance that are important to her, I said, you decide what you want. My life in Canada starts from May 26th, 1967, the day I landed at the Halifax airport. I was picked up by my brother and his wife. My brother was an eye specialist, just started practicing in Amherst, Nova Scotia, a year before. So he was there to pick me up. With me was my wife and 2 kids, Faisal and Imtiaz.
And I can remember the day. I was at that time just 5.5 years old. And I can remember arriving at Halifax International Airport. Still a little bit of snow on the ground, May 24th, I believe, 67. And my uncle, who had just set up his practice in ophthalmology in Amherst, was there to pick us up.
And he drove us to his place in Amherst, an apartment building at that time. And within 2 weeks of my arrival, I got a job with the Department of Highways.
When I first met Saeed Ali, he was the director of Motor Vehicle Inspection Division, and I was, if I remember correctly, the director of the Licenses and Registrations Division. Well, we were concerned about motor vehicles on the road from 2 directions. He was concerned with their condition, mechanical condition particularly. I was concerned, if they were in mechanical condition, with the requirement for registration for them to be on the highway. Later on in our experience, Saeed Ali was appointed to be the Registrar of Motor Vehicles and Executive Director of the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And I moved on, as I mentioned earlier, to become the Director of Motor Vehicle Regulation Development, and in that position was also appointed as assistant to the registrar and appointed deputy registrar. In that capacity, we had side-by-side offices and frequent consultation and discussions of various matters appropriate to the operation of the registry.
We were as normal as we could be. I mean, I can remember in this home and across the street, we would play everything, sports. We were both into sports, and thank God, even though he was, you know, not in the best of health, he was well enough to, we played road hockey, baseball, flag football.
What I remember most is growing up, you know, having to go to the hospital a lot, you know. Weekends spent in the hospital with Faisal being admitted, and we would spend the whole day there, and just to be with him. And you know, as a little kid, you try to find whatever fun you can. So in a hospital, of course, it's not much fun, but I would just get little kicks out of going to the cafeteria, you know, and getting French fries or chips.
I think, you know, it first really came to light when, you know, he was getting ready for the first kidney transplant. So I was, you know, just old enough to start to understand what is going on. And then, you know, realizing that your dad and your brother are going to have operations, because as you know, it's probably come across, the first kidney transplant was a living related donor transplant, and my dad was the donor. So, you know, that was a big eye opener. And that's when I think first started to realize the impact and the significance of this whole issue.
The only thing I remember about the transplant is related to my father, because that's the first time I went to the hospital and I saw my father this time, you know, in the hospital, and it was very traumatic for me. I actually fainted, yes, because I still remember that in my mind, seeing him in the hospital bed with tubes, you know, coming out of his body, and he's weak and his eyes are closed, and I see him for the first time like that. And seeing him so vulnerable, I was only 8 or 9, and I fainted.
Tomorrow is the surgery or day after something, and I asked Faisal, I think it was the next day, are you ready, Faisal? And he was in a very frail condition, going down, no kidneys, dialysis, little hope of anything. All hopes were pinned on this transplant. So I asked him, are you ready, Faisal? And the answer he gave me, amazing. He said, I'm ready. But are you ready, Dad? Abbu? Are you ready, Abbu? When he said that, I couldn't control myself. The tears came rolling down. I hugged him. I said, my son, don't ever think on those lines. Our culture, our upbringing, love between father, son, mother, son, brothers, is so deep that you don't even consider or think about it. So I'm ready before you even thought you were going to ask this question. So we'll go. So we went.
My father and I were side by side on the gurney, you know, and I remember he just holding his hand and wishing each other luck. And then I went to one room and he went to the next room, and after that, you know, I'm pretty sure that when I woke up, the first thing I wanted to know how he was, and I'm pretty sure he asked the same question. Why was it? That's the way it was. You know, I remember that.
Although the transplant itself was successful in the long run, as with any surgery, unfortunately, as I know, being a surgeon, complications can arise, and unfortunately, and in transplantation, one of the, you know, common things is infection. because the patient is immunosuppressed in order for the graft to work. And he did have problems with infection that, as you'll hear, or if you've heard already, led to, he had to take antibiotics, and unfortunately, one of the antibiotics has a side effect of ototoxicity. So that was an unfortunate complication, and he basically lost his hearing. So he had a kidney that was working, but now a new struggle is, boy, I can't hear. So it was devastating.
It was devastating to each and every one of us when he lost his hearing. I mean, it changed our lives completely for each of us, each one of us in our own way, to see him suffer like that. I still have a memory of him. He had started his first summer job and he was going to start university, so it was the first time he kind of made his own money, and he was so happy, and he loved music. And so he went out and he bought all these record albums like Rod Stewart and, people of that time. And when he lost his hearing and he came home from the hospital, and there was the stack of the albums over there in the dining room that weren't even opened. And to see him walk over there and pull out these albums that he knew he could never hear again for the rest of his life, I still remember that. And, it's just how he has managed, to get through all that and still be a positive person and not be bitter, Here he had his transplant and we thought, okay, now he can start his life. Everything's going to be great from now on. And then to have this happen to him, I mean, it was like it was too much.
What does it feel like to be completely deaf? So at lunchtime, all the secretaries and all my co-workers, bosses, they're all gone I was alone. So I had cotton thing, I think, or something there. I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it in both ears. And I sat down. Believe you me, 20 minutes I was going crazy. I couldn't take it. Nothing, not a pin drop would I listen. And this, my son, poor son, who had perfect hearing, and after all this trauma, had this additional trauma of a silent world around him. It was nerve-wracking for me.
After I lost my hearing, I spent a lot of time by myself. I didn't really want to see a lot of people because I was having a lot of trouble. The first 10 years after my transplant, I had a lot of trouble communicating because I was a poor lip reader, and my hearing loss was very profound and it was all jumbled, so I just didn't go out, and I didn't socialize much. So the cat was like a constant companion at that time for a few years. I think he was with us for about 10 years. To cope with it, I mostly turned to, religion or Allah. I decided after I lost my hearing, I wasn't well for, I didn't understand why it happened, So it took me quite a long time to adjust to it. Maybe, a year or so. After about a year, it took me to accept the hearing loss. It took a long time, a year. After I accepted it, that it wasn't going to return, then I decided to turn to Allah and the Quran. I read, and I went through the whole book, and I took notes, and I came to the conclusion that, it was Allah's will, and what happens, and I had to make the best of the situation, and I just decided that I had to keep busy and find something else to do with what I had left, and I still had a good mind. So I decided to take up studying, mostly via correspondence, and that was my first step towards, renewing, getting my life back in order after my hearing loss. I needed to do something to pass the time, you know, besides this. So photography was something I took up on my own to, you know, to keep my mind occupied and to, you know, to pass the time. And because I was genuinely interested in that from an earlier age, even I had taken photography in grade 8, in the 8th grade, so at that time, so I just reacquainted myself with photography, and I used to, you know, get in the car and drive off by myself and just to take photos around Nova Scotia. And, you know, I became quite interested in landscape photography.
It lasted for many years until this opportunity arose with hearing device, really, and that was, as at that time, of course, that medical service was not available in Nova Scotia. And the only place, the leaders in the world at that time happened to be an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in Oklahoma City. And of course, the Nova Scotia government at that time wasn't enthusiastic about, you know, covering the costs of him traveling to the U.S. to have this medical service. But, you know, somehow, and with the help of Dr. McDonald, Alan McDonald, who was Fassel's surgeon, transplant surgeon, and a very, very outstanding individual. In fact, one of the surgeons that trained me in general surgery in Halifax, he was very instrumental in making that happen. He wrote, I believe, some very influential letters to the provincial government at the time, and basically through his help, it happened. You know, that we were able to. Fassel was able to go with my dad to Oklahoma City, have the procedure done, and then, you know, success.
After the cochlear transplant, things got much better too. After that, so he was working and moved out on his own. That was a big thing for us. You know, how is Fassel going to? We were all concerned. You know, yeah, he has the transplant in his ear, but still, I mean, life is different for a person, you know, with challenges with his hearing still, in a way. So we were always worried. But you know, he was strong enough in his. You know, he thought he was capable, and we, you know, supported him for that, and mashallah, he did, you know, lived on his own for many years.
He's working for the government of Nova Scotia, Department of Transportation, and alhamdulillah, by God's grace, he's been maintaining reasonably good health. He can drive. He got married.
We basically do everything together, like wherever we go. Sometime, like when I'm not home, like he's home, so I feel like I should be with him, and sometime when I'm home, he's not home, so he feels like something I should be with him. But like whenever we do things, we do together. Mostly we do a journey together. Like we're traveling a lot with each other. We're traveling a lot along with each other, and then our lives are like pretty much very smoothly going around, very smooth. It's been 17 years, mashallah. And then, like, we've been happily married.
When I have needed them, like I've been in hospital, something, you know, my father has always been there. When I was a young child, I remember him holding my hand, you know, even when they were putting an IV in or something. And I could, you know, as an adult, I understood how difficult that must have been for him. And, you know, my mother spent entire days at the hospital with me when my father was working. So, you know, that was not easy, you know, because I had brothers and sisters also that she had to look after. So I have, you know, like I said, my brothers and sisters have always, even though, you know, my parents have devoted a lot of time as I was a child to me, they have always been supportive to me. They've, you know, they've never, you know, there's no jealousy or anything like that in our family. You know, we were very close, so I can't really say that I can think of one thing, but it's just a total support and love for him.
It's at Dartmouth Sportsplex.
Dartmouth Sportsplex, and that's on Tuesday?
We are going on Tuesday.
Yeah, on
Yes,
Tuesday.
yes, inshallah.
That's good.
Yeah, we are going on Tuesday.
So,
And our mosque is going to have it on Wednesday.
yeah, I know, that's why I
Yeah,
was wondering
yeah.
what was going on there.
Yeah,
So you'll take your car, I'll take mine.
yeah.
And Jas can take his car.
Yeah, because you have
At
the
some
two
point,
kids
you
if
have
they
to
want to
make
go
a
there.
decision, you know,
Yeah.
whether you're going to just stay by yourself and feel sorry for yourself, or you're going to pick it up, and because no one else is going to do it for you. So you have to, like I said, it's part of it is just self-initiative, and part of it is just you know, and do what you can do, and then hope that Allah will help you in whatever you do. And like I said, it was a two-tracked effort, personal effort on to keep my mind sharp. I took correspondence courses, and then I also turned to the Quran. And you know, I prayed and studied the Quran, and those two together helped me get through those years until I found a job in 1985. And after that, you know, things improved slowly.